Hey friends, welcome to the Empowered Homes Podcast. Purpose of this podcast is to grow strong families by connecting church and home. Today we are in studio with the one and only Megan Landy.
What's up?
And returning, the one and only Maggie.
Don't call it a comeback.
You're back.
I'm back.
You're back. If you go back in the old episodes, we used to have a thing called the Maggie and Bobby, or Maggie and Bob.
Just
I think
Bob.
It was
Bob.
just Maggie and Bob.
Maggie and Bob.
We were real casual.
We were real cash, and we would do just fun stuff,
Yeah.
and it was cool and awesome.
Yeah.
But Maggie, you were doing something a little different the
Yes.
last season a couple
yeah.
years. For the listeners going, I was wondering where Maggie has been. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, I took a role with Lifeway Christian Resources as a content editor with the Gospel Project for Kids team. So I am over our midweek resources and our kids worship resources. So I get to work with writers and work with the leader guides and churches and making sure that we put out the very best possible products to teach kids about the gospel.
Yeah. So Maggie took all the amazing stuff you were doing here, and now you're all over everywhere.
Yeah, it's been fun.
How many, you may not know this answer, so random
Good. I like
fun
being
fact.
asked questions I don't know the answer right off the bat.
Right off the bat. Like, how many churches are using
gosh.
your resources?
It's a couple thousand at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really exciting.
We're one of them.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
we use it,
that's one of my favorite things to tell churches is that when I was a children's minister, we made a curriculum switch and we chose the Gospel Project. So long before I was ever employed by Lifeway, ever had anything to do with the Gospel Project, I chose to use it with our own kids here. And so I love that. I love that I get to back something that I really, really believe in.
Yeah, thousands of churches benefit from your work, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome.
It's a gift. It's so sweet.
But you're back with us today. We want to talk through, we're continuing our series on spiritual disciplines. We want to look at the importance and the impact that spiritual disciplines should have a role in our homes, but specifically the impact it has with our children. Mm-hmm. But before, we got a little fun segment of the podcast called Trends, and I'm making all of this up as we go. So
It's an inspired title.
It's we're gonna look at one trend that's going on. I was trying to think of like what are the trends that we're seeing, and we're kind of at the end of this trend. But I read some fun, interesting takes on it. But I want to get y'all's take on this trend that every listener listening will know, or I guarantee you 90% of them own one of these. So first, it is the Stanley Cup trend.
Oh, yeah.
So first question, do y'all own one? Do you
I
have
do
a
not.
Stanley?
I do. I was gifted a Stanley.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay. So you were gifted. You didn't purchase it yourself.
No, my roommate, Kayla Suself, gifted me a Stanley for Christmas a couple years ago.
Okay.
Which
That's a really nice gift.
I know, it is a really nice gift. Yeah, and it's kept me well hydrated.
So you used your Stanley Cup.
I did. Yeah. I have learned that I am just going to dive in with whatever the cool water bottle is. That's just who I am.
Yeah.
And I tried to avoid it, and I can't. It's who I am.
Yeah.
And so now I'm onto the Owala, which is the current.
I've seen that.
The
That's what I
current
was saying.
trend.
Saying that the Stanley's kind of making its way out, but the what's it called?
The Owala.
Owala. I've seen those. Do you have an Owala?
I do have an Owala. And also, I've kind of been rebellious against the Stanleys. So I have ones that look like Stanleys.
Yeah.
Right.
And they work well.
Yeah.
But they're
They
not.
work
But
just as well, I'm sure.
what I love about this trend is that it kind of is on the way out. However, we got an email from the school.
Yes, that's what I want to talk
After Christmas, you're going to bring that up.
Yeah.
After Christmas, we got an email from the school, and they were saying that they could tell that a lot of kids got new water bottles, which were Stanleys, and new watches, and it was being a very big distraction in the classrooms because the Stanleys are spilling because they're knocking over and
They're
spilling.
also so loud when they fall.
Yeah.
It's a piece of metal, and it's just a big clunky thing, and it's But this is what was crazy with the trend. So elementary kids carrying them around. We already mentioned that. I know my daughter, she has one and takes to school.
I've seen it in
every
Collide. Yes.
single day.
She has a little cover though, so it doesn't spill.
Yeah, she's got a cover that you put on the straw. She's got like this little mini purse thing that attached. She's got all the attachments. Like it's
She's
bizarre.
accessorized her water bottle.
Yes. Oh man, it's crazy. But did you know that in 2019, Stanley, all of Stanley sales they made $73 million, which you're like, that's a lot of money. $73 million. As of last year, they brought in $750 million.
My word.
And most of that is from this cup.
Influencers.
Which is,
Influencers.
because the company's been around for years
Yeah.
and years.
So I have a Stanley coffee thermos that I've had for 20 years. And my oldest, Charlie, thought it'd be funny to make fun of all the kids after Christmas. So he brought that to school and filled it with
Amazing.
water and carried this old thermos, this old
rugged
good.
of him.
din it
Yes.
up, and he got made fun of quite a bit.
I
But
like it.
so talking about trends, I bring up that because I think we have so many different trends throughout. I remember in college, Now jeans, like having a Now jean bottle with stickers. I still use it like
I
every
just
day.
used mine a couple weekends ago because
Yeah.
that's what I take when I go hiking. It's a lot lighter.
Yeah, it's lighter. It's easy. Tervis. You remember
Yep,
Tervises?
had one of
Do
those.
you have one of those?
Wide
I'm
collection
telling
of
you, I've had them
Turbises.
all.
Yeah. And the Yeti cups, the Yetis,
Yep,
the 30-ounce
have
Yeti.
a couple of those.
It's too
Yeah.
expensive for me.
Yeah.
I've been gifted all of these.
Yeah.
To be fair.
So when the Yetis came out, I don't know why, but everybody thought Bobby needs that. And I got probably 6 that year for Christmas. And it was crazy.
One for every day of the week.
What about Hydro Flask?
That is one I didn't partake in.
No Hydro
I
Flask?
skipped over that one.
You have a Hydro Flask? So these trends, and now the Awala, is that how you say it? Awala is coming. What do you predict is going to be after the Awala?
Just like probably having an IV and carrying that around. I feel like that would be like just the most direct way to hydration.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's true.
Oh my God. that
Well, and
got me
also,
choked up.
I mean, we've seen the ones that are like this tall. If you're
Yeah.
watching on video, okay, it's like so tall,
Oh,
like
gosh.
Yeah.
half my body size, that have all the little, like you have to drink it by a certain hour, the times
my,
on
wife,
it.
my wife has one of those.
Yeah.
Yes, so you
it's
just
like
carry
a
those
weapon.
around.
Yeah.
I think people, I mean, when I used to work out at a public gym, a lot of the guys, but even girls, would just carry around the gallon jug.
I was just gonna
Yeah.
say.
So
I think that should just
the
be a
milk
thing.
jug.
Yeah.
Milk
yeah,
jug.
we didn't
It's
talk
like a
about
milk
the
jug
old
of
school
water.
milk jug.
Oh, I'm in on that.
Yeah.
I can do the milk jug.
Okay.
Yeah.
Much cheaper than a Stanley.
One time I was working from a coffee shop and I watched this college guy come in with his empty milk jug. And you know how they'll have like the complimentary water there,
Like
like
the
at the
cucumber
coffee bar?
water and
Yeah.
lemons?
And he
Yeah.
just filled up the entire milk jug with the complimentary water. I was like, way to use your resources.
Yeah, that coming in clutch.
Uh-huh.
So, trending. So here's the thing that they were talking about on this article I read. It says, while fads like these are not ethically or morally wrong, they can reveal the idols of our children's hearts. If they believe that having a certain thing is the passport to happiness and acceptance. Teaching your kids to love the Lord above all else should be key. What do you think about these trends and how we shepherd our kids' hearts not to... Because even Chandler, she begged for this thing because all her friends had it and she didn't want to get left out. So how do we balance that, helping our kids get stuff that they want, but also not letting that be part of their identity too? I don't know. What do y'all think?
That's a great question.
That's a hard question.
I think even hard for us as adults
I
sometimes,
know.
right?
I
Yeah.
To like,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I feel like you have to know also your kid and sort of what their tendency to gravitate towards, and so you start to identify and you see the things that you know that they're obsessing over, but also like gently approaching it in a way of like, well, if we all struggle even as adults with this, right, how do we help them see it as a thing that's getting in the way possibly of, you know, the greater good of understanding who they are in Jesus and their identity. But that's a long conversation, right, that's happening as they're growing. And so you might come at it kind of like directly sometimes, but I feel like it's like a long play,
Yeah.
I think, in terms of having conversation of who they are in Christ and how things can get in the way.
Yeah, I think you can go one of two ways. You can be hardcore of like, no, I'm anti trends and all this stuff, or you just fall right into it. I think there's a balance and a good reminder, and why I kind of brought it up, of as parents, as we are shaping our children, like even this is an opportunity for discipleship. Like even a Stanley Cup is a way to talk about their heart, talk about what's going on, what's important, what's not important. And there's nothing wrong with having a Stanley Cup, but it is gets into this trap of their worth or value. If I have this, then I'll be cool or I'll be accepted. Or no, man, you are already approved and accepted. And so leveraging the trends that we see for discipleship is kind of easy to do. We just got to be aware and open to it. So shifting gears, one thing that's not a trend, there's not really a silver bullet. There's not really a new, cool, flashy. We have incredible resources that are new, but when it comes to spiritual disciplines, specifically looking at our kids, why are spiritual disciplines important, Maggie, for our kids, but also surrounding our whole family around these disciplines?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the reasons that I found myself talking and thinking more about spiritual disciplines is that one of the pieces of curriculum that I oversee solely focuses on leading kids through spiritual disciplines. And so every 4 weeks or so, kids are talking about a different spiritual discipline, whether that's fasting or prayer, or generosity, and so on. And so it's been cool to get to think about this and really marinate in it every day. And so what I've sort of come down to is I think why we need to be talking about and leading our kids in spiritual disciplines, it's past, present, and future, right? So past, right? We use lots of different ways to communicate different messages. And so if you're going to send a quick message, you're going to use a text message, right? Or if you're going to catch up with a friend, you're going to use FaceTime or a phone call. Well, spiritual disciplines are the way that God has given us to communicate with him, to put ourselves in a stance where we can hear from him, where we can speak to him, where we can be changed by the Holy Spirit. And so years and years and years and years ago, way, way, way back in the past, God gave us this gift of these ways of communicating with us and us communicating back to him through spiritual disciplines. And they allow us to reflect the life that Jesus lived while he was on earth. So past, right? Present, our kids are growing up in a fast-paced, noisy world. And they get to benefit from things like iPhones and microwaves and television and movie streaming without having to wait for commercials. And so they are getting to have these instantaneous results. The issue is that spiritual disciplines are not the same, right? And so we need to be teaching them and to value silence and to value stillness and to value that weight that comes with practicing spiritual disciplines and to understand that we are not going to get instantaneous results from practicing spiritual disciplines. So we want to set our kids up for success to practice this sort of patience that comes with spiritual disciplines, because the world is not going to teach that anymore.
Right.
And then future. One of my favorite quotes, and I wish I could remember who would say it because I would give them credit. I say it a lot and I think about it a lot. But we are preparing kids for 60 to 70 years of following Jesus. And so we're not just trying to get them to make good decisions. We're not just trying to get them to go to church, right? But we are preparing them to walk with Jesus for the rest of their days, hopefully. And so spiritual disciplines allow that, right? We are giving them sort of this framework to follow Jesus, to grow closer to Jesus, that they can use for the rest of their lives. And so I sort of think about it like tying a shoe. When we teach a kid to tie a shoe, we're going to teach them on their own shoes, and so the laces are a little bit smaller. But as they grow older and as their feet grow bigger, those shoes grow bigger, but the mechanics of tying a shoelace are the same. And so it's sort of the same when you think about prayer or generosity or Bible study, right? So we're teaching them these skills, these disciplines on their level, but those mechanics are going to be the same all throughout their life.
So
Yeah.
good, yeah.
That, I think just hearing you break it down in such a way, especially with the shoes, we are constantly wanting to teach our kids, because most of us are thinking with the end in mind of when my kids are, going off to college or go to trade school or becoming adults, whatever they end up doing. I know there's things like I want them to know how to do their own laundry. I don't want them to be the kid who wears the same shirt every day at college.
Whose mom comes and gets their laundry, like my
The
husband.
stinky kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
You just
wow,
gave him
just
away.
put him
I
on
don't know. I'm
blast.
just putting that out there.
Let me just repeat that. Don't be the kid in college whose mom comes to the school to pick up your
I didn't
clothes
know that was an option.
Yeah.
and do your laundry for you. Yeah.
That's right.
So it's little stuff like that, like cooking. Like I want them to be able to know how to cook. Like, so it's a no-brainer for us to think of all these skills that we want them to have as adults. But what do y'all think spiritual disciplines tends to be not as important to a lot of families? It's kind of the back burner. Like, why do y'all think it's maybe difficult for parents, or that doesn't seem to be the norm? If we're doing a checklist of all the things I want my kid to leave my home with skills or knowledge, the spiritual disciplines usually isn't on that list. And so what do y'all think some of the obstacles or hurdles or challenges with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's several different things that we're trying to combat when we think about spiritual disciplines. And to be fair, I do think that a lot of these abilities or practices are things that parents do want their kids to practice and they're thinking about, but maybe we're not thinking about it with that umbrella term of spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices, or we're not thinking about it as comprehensively as we could. But I think, one of the reasons is that we have a fear of religion over relationship. I think that we've seen that in the church over the past,
That's good.
20-something years. And understandably, right? A lot of us have grown up and we have seen these disciplines misused, or we have seen them practiced in a way that God didn't intend. And so I think that we have sort of pendulum swung to the other side. But the beauty of it is that these are, like I said earlier, they're communication tools. They're ways that God has given us to grow in our relationship with Him. And so I think it's just a matter of, thinking about it that way and understanding how God intended for these spiritual practices to be used. I also think that we, as adults, can often have a lack of understanding of what spiritual practices are. And so if I don't understand something, then I'm definitely not going to turn around and teach it to a kid, right? Because that's uncomfortable and it puts me in a position to where, I am not sure what I'm saying. And so I think that a lot of times we as adults need to be a little bit more proactive about understanding what these look like in our own lives. And then naturally that puts us in a position where it's just from our lives overflowing into kids that are around us. I think that sometimes we think that kids are too young to be practicing spiritual disciplines. But the beauty of spiritual disciplines is that God didn't create them for adults. He created them for believers. And so if your child is a believer, then spiritual disciplines are created for them.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Say that again.
I don't know that I can.
Say it again. Yeah.
Yeah, so spiritual disciplines aren't created just for adults, right? They're created for believers. And
Wow.
so if your child is a believer, then spiritual disciplines are for them. And there are some really great ways that we can teach kids how to practice these spiritual disciplines. And honestly, I think that some of them can be encouraging for us as adults to sort of practice that childlike faith when we sort of strip away some of the complications that we have added to spiritual practices and spiritual disciplines. And when we start practicing them and thinking through them at a level that kids can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I think, you know, when it comes down to it, I think a lot of times we don't practice them because they're not fun or we don't think they're fun. And when I started realizing that, it was really convicting for my own life because I want kids to think that church is a fun place, and I want them to think of Jesus as their fun friend. And he is, and church is a fun place, right? But we also ask a lot of things from kids that aren't fun, right? A kid doesn't come home from school and say, I have homework, but it doesn't sound fun. And then we just say, okay, well, yeah, you're right. Like, that doesn't sound fun. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Or we don't let kids not brush their teeth because that's not a fun thing.
Yeah.
We don't let them get cavities just for the sake of fun. And so it is okay that spiritual disciplines might not be like a party, although one of the disciplines is celebration. So that actually is a party.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it is okay. And the Bible even says in Hebrews that no discipline seems enjoyable at the time, but painful. But later on, however, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. And so the Bible speaks to this, right? It speaks to how discipline might not be the most fun thing at the beginning, but as we grow in it, we start to see that fruit of righteousness grow in our lives. But all of that said, I do think that there are ways that we can make these fun for kids to practice and that we can make these fun for families to practice. I mean, my writers do it every single week. So I firmly believe that.
Yeah,
That's
it's obtainable. What were you going to say?
Well, no, I just think just, in terms of going back to sort of like if as adults we don't maybe understand disciplines and we've talked about this in a couple of episodes about spiritual disciplines, but, not having it maybe modeled for you.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
but also accepting like, okay, like that wasn't modeled for me, but we can learn and grow
Yeah.
together. And that does make it fun,
Yes.
and when you're finding out what the rainbow means after the flood, together with your kid, like that's exciting. And so as you do it with them, you get to bring some of that excitement and it becomes more alive for both of you at the same time.
Absolutely.
And so just
good.
modeling it is
Yeah,
good.
as my kids get older, and I mean, I'm on staff at a church, so I should have it all figured out. But me and Charlie were doing some prayers and some different stuff, and he made the comment one night we were going through, and he was like, "Dad, like, you've already done all this." I said, "No, I'm doing this for the first time with you," and it just blew his mind of like, "Oh, you're learning along with me," and he's playing guitar and he's starting to do worship, and he's starting to play for the KSM band, our student ministry band, and I'm helping him learn chords and go through that. And he was like, "Dad, like, did you ever do anything like?" I was like, "No." One, but two, it clicked for him of like, we're doing this together. But then, in his very humble self, he's like, "So I'm better than you at guitar. I'm better at something I know." And I just celebrated that. Of like, he's like, "I am doing something that you can't do," and he was bragging about how he's better at guitar than me. But and I said, "Yeah, buddy, like you got this." And so fostering that with our kids and going and growing with them, I think it's huge. You talked about legalism a little bit. I think there is a fear of that, and we mentioned this in other episodes too. I think sometimes with spiritual disciplines, it comes off, or we have this thought as adults, and we're scared to do this with our children of, you have to do these things to earn favor. You read your Bible, you pray, you fast, you're doing these things, and God's somehow going to love you more. And I think we got to be clear, that's not how God operates. This is a relationship that we're working towards, and all we're doing is growing that relationship. It's not. How do we help parents communicate that better, but at the same time not throwing it out the window? Like, well, we're just not going to do spiritual disciplines because we don't want to be legalistic.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's something that we have to ask I think it's, it's not a one-time question, right? It's something that we have to continually think about. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, as the adults, thinking about our own hearts and thinking about our own responses to these practices and, to things like prayer or tithing or fasting. Like, what is my own, immediate reaction when I hear those words? And then doing some work with the Lord, if that's, if you don't feel like that's in a healthy spot, and, do your own research and read some books on your own and think through it and pray through it and, read what the Bible has to say about those things. And I really think that as we start to explore these disciplines more and more, then we're going to see them for the gift that they are, the gift that God has given us. And I think then we turn around and that naturally shows in how we talk about those with our kids and how we lead kids in practicing these spiritual disciplines.
Yeah, and I think, the key word that you used is practices. And we've talked about this because we've been practicing Sabbath.
Yes.
But also, when we were texting about this episode and we were talking about questions and stuff, I had mentioned to you that I was trying to have a prayer morning the other morning, and it didn't go. It just, you're like, how can you not have a pray? I'm like, I don't know. My brain just wasn't going to do it.
Oh, no, I think we've all been there.
And your response to me was, that's just the beauty of practice. And so, practicing, we're teaching our kids to practice just like they would practice anything else. Yeah. And it's not going to look perfect. And because it's a relationship, right? We're practicing talking to God, but getting closer to Him. And there's a richness there, but it is a practice, and it will take time, and that's okay. That's a good thing, you know. And that I don't know. I feel a lot of grace in that. Just even your text to me was just like, okay, it's okay.
And I say that because I'm in the same spot, right? So it's I understand that, some days it feels like this is going really great, and other days you're like, man, it almost feels like I wasted time there, but it's not true. It's not true. Yeah. But just think about how beautiful that is for your kids to watch too, as you grow in that.
Yeah, and like you said, 60, 70 years, that's a long time. This is a long journey. It's a long game for us to practice these things. So I've just got, I don't know what's going on with me. I'm
allergies. You know what it is?
Thing,
it's pollen.
I know.
It was all over my windshield on my truck.
Yeah, I had a bad sinus infection 2 weeks ago, so still recovering. So listeners, I'm hacking up over here if you're watching.
Send Bobby cough drops.
Trying to drink water, and I don't typically do that. So just address that. Now move on.
If only you had a Stanley.
If I had a Stanley.
Bam.
Pulling it all
I think we ended there.
Yeah. That was a callback. Nice. Last thing, you have this really cool talk that you've given before. Just give us kind of in a nutshell, because you could probably spend an hour talking about this, but this bicycle model.
Yeah.
Break that down for us, because it's really cool.
Yeah. So where this came from was my dad loved to ride bikes before kids came along in his life. And so when we were born, he naturally he wanted that to be part of our lives. And so I was thinking about it, and, he wanted us to learn how to ride a bike, but at 2 years old, he didn't just stick me on a bicycle and tell me to go. And I think sometimes with spiritual disciplines, that's sort of how we approach it, of okay, well, kids should just know how to pray, or kids should just know how to read the Bible. But it's like any other skill that we're trying to teach them. And so with a bike, you think about it, and first he had me ride on, a toddler bike seat on the back of his bike. And so I watched as he put on his helmet, and I saw as he made turn signals, and I saw, I felt the motion of a bike. Did I know how to ride a bike immediately after that? No, definitely not. But then, a couple of years later, I get on a tricycle, and again, I'm riding alongside of him, but a little bit more independence, but practicing alongside of him. And then finally, I got to the age where I was able to ride my own bicycle. And so at that point, is it perfect? No, because it's a practice.
Yes, practice.
But I was able to go visit friends' houses on my own and, choose where I wanted to go and how I wanted to get there. And so, more independence. And so that's sort of how I like to think about leading kids through spiritual disciplines, especially in the home setting. Yeah. And so there are ways that we can start by setting up our lives so that kids are watching us practice spiritual disciplines. And so sort of that bike seat mentality where they're not the ones practicing it yet, but they are watching you practice those spiritual disciplines, and they're getting excited and they're thinking about what that might look like in their lives. And then they get a little bit older, and there are ways that we can sort of practice those alongside of them and really have it be a family moment. And then, the goal is that going back to that 60 to 70 years of following Jesus, the goal is that they would practice those on their own. And especially with those older elementary aged kids, there are ways that we can equip kids and set them up for success to where they are able to practice some of these spiritual disciplines on their own. And, I think a lot of times all of these happen at once, depending on what you're talking through in your family. And but just sort of realizing that there's not just one way to teach kids about spiritual disciplines and to practice these with kids, but there's many different ways that we can make these a part of their lives.
That's powerful. I mean,
Right.
just understanding the implication of the process for kids, and also giving yourself grace that they're not going to be Bible scholars. Like, they're not going to, they may, but there is a process of the journey, and that's a great illustration of how we can see that in our home and how we can slowly implement those spiritual disciplines. Maggie, it's always fun.
This
we
has
need
been
to
great.
have you back more.
Yeah.
She's back.
I know.
And now look at our studio.
I know. So, we did a call out. Oh, go ahead.
Direct correlation, I'm sure.
Yes.
We really spruced the place up just for
Thank you.
But we did a little call out to people to help us remodel, and one person responded,
Yeah.
and so we just went for it.
That one
and
person
Andrew
did a
helped
great
us.
job.
I
Andrew
know.
helped us,
And so we've got some good things rolling.
Yeah. Looks
this
so
is
good.
this is like a soundproofing too, to give us better audio quality for the
Yes.
studio. But
That's good.
it's so if you're listening and you're still with us,
And you can't see us.
you can't see us. We have what do we call it, Eric? What is this called? Wood slats. I don't know. They're like,
It's very trendy.
it's very
Yes.
trendy.
We're trending in here.
Right,
It smells good in here.
That's
If you
right.
can, and we got a little light here. Well, this will hang up on the wall.
A Glow
eventually.
EH sign.
Yeah.
Can you
so-
envision it if you're only listening? Can you just envision what it
Close
is?
your
You have to
eyes,
go to
unless you're
YouTube and look
driving.
at it.
So if you're
Yeah, don't.
don't if you're driving, don't go to YouTube. But if you've never watched the episode on YouTube, go to YouTube and tell us what else is needed. We're talking about putting plants in here. What's your favorite plant, Maggie?
Oh, man, I wish I was a plant person.
I couldn't name one
am
plant.
not.
You're a dog person.
I am a dog person.
Yeah.
I think a dog would be a great add
Yes.
to this studio.
EH dog.
What
dog.
what a distraction that would be, though.
Yeah.
But Megan had a great plant name that you you
fiddle
said
fig.
earlier. Yeah,
But it had to be fake because
it
there's
is
no real
so
lighting
fun
in
to
here.
say too. Fiddle fig.
Is
Fiddle fig.
ivy a plant? I couldn't name one
Ivy
plant.
is a
I
plant.
You don't know any plants?
What's a like?
I mean, ivy is a
It's
plant. It's not
green.
one that we want in
a
here, I don't
bush,
think.
a shrub,
You could have it.
I don't know.
Coming.
A fern.
A fern. I've heard of a fern.
You have some
Yeah.
little succulents
Yeah.
over
We have
there.
Succulents. I know what that is.
That's true.
Yeah. Anyways, I digress. Spiritual disciplines. Maggie, thanks for kind of dropping wisdom on us.
thanks
We'd
for having
love to
me.
have you come back and do some more episodes with us.
Yes.
But just so grateful for just what you do and the impact that you have for churches all over. It's amazing, and your wisdom is awesome. So we're proud of you.
Well, it's been
And,
fun.
yeah.
Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you want any information on spiritual disciplines, we've got some great stuff, Megan. Where can they find anything that we have on Empowered Homes for spiritual disciplines?
You got to go straight to our website, empoweredhomes.org. You can find marriage, parenting, personal growth resources. There are some original resources with Maggie
That is
video.
true. That's true. Yeah.
So
We have some
go
power-
check
That was a
her
long time
out.
ago.
With some power parenting videos with Maggie.
right.
Go check them
Power
out.
parenting,
yeah.
So but make sure you go visit the website, email us if you have questions, podcast@empoweredhomes.org.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.